And I have one client who every time she was given a price, she tried to lower it, and she tried negotiating to bring the price down. And guess what was driving her crazy about her clients is they were trying to do the same with her.
This is Insight, scaling lessons from the street. In this series, we mastermind a set of topics plaguing women entrepreneurs on a mighty growth path, such as mindset, business modeling, sales, marketing, finance, and legal. Whether you're looking for world domination or to work less while being more profitable, you'll find learnings in here from women who know the journey and fight in the trenches every day. Insight is co-hosted by Andrea Henry, Megan O'Neill, Shelagh Cummins, Susan Diaz, and Wendy Brookhouse.
My name is Wendy Brookhouse, and I am one of the co-hosts of Insight. I am the founder and chief strategist of Blackstar Wealth, where we help smart, ambitious women find, grow, and keep their money. Today, it's part 2 of how to price your product, and we've gone through how the mindset can definitely play games with you in terms of the pricing, but today we're going to talk about a little bit more of some of the structural stuff, like the nitty-gritty, and oh my gosh, you guys, numbers, okay? So we're going to talk about a little bit of numbers today. And so I think there's 5 things that we need to kind of keep in mind when we're pricing. And one of the biggest mistakes I see is that people don't necessarily always factor in their overhead into their pricing. They look at, it cost me this much for this piece of paper and this much for this, but they forget, especially if they were to move from, say, working from home to an office where they pay some rent. Rent is overhead, and you have to cover that cost with the products and services that you sell. You need to allocate part of the pricing to cover the overhead. You are somewhat of an overhead at times, and you need to cover those pieces off. The other one to look at is your cost of goods sold. So if you look at your cost of goods sold, if as a sole proprietor you actually have an independent contractor helping you out, that may actually be a cost of the goods sold. So, when you think about how the piece goes of how much it is you're charging versus how much you pay the person to deliver, you need to be aware of that as well. So those are 2 kind of the accounting pieces that you kind of have to take into effect. And then capacity, because sometimes we think we put the pricing together, we're going to make this much, but we haven't looked at how much time we actually need to put into something. And analyzing everything. I had a client who was doing courses, and we actually analyzed all the time she was going to take to put into developing the course and selling the course, and how much she was actually going to make at the end of it after she factored all her costs in. And she had 3 different courses she was doing, so she ended up cutting one completely because it wasn't contributing enough to the business. And you have to look at your market. What will your market bear? I mean, we talked a little bit about that in the last podcast, but how much your market will bear, there is a top line sometimes in terms of what people will pay for a particular service or product. And if you're not differentiated enough to be able to get a higher price, you have to kind of be aware of that. And the final thing, and one of my favorite things is, hey, have you factored in paying yourself enough so you can have a life? Just a small thing, because I see this all the time where, in particular, women will sometimes not price it enough so that they can actually pay themselves. So I'm going to open it up now to you guys and see if you guys can tell me what your experience is with these particular elements of building your pricing.
I think this is Shelagh speaking. One of the biggest shifts that I made early on, well, actually, I made 2. Number 1, I stopped asking people what they thought about my pricing, and especially looking for validation from, we talked about it in the last episode, but looking for validation from people who just didn't understand what it is that I do. And there's nothing more disheartening than, telling someone who you love your price and then having them diss it or say that it's ridiculous or there's no way people should be paying that for whatever it is you do. So that was the first thing I did. But the second thing I did is I stopped pricing based on my time. And as a coach, obviously my fulfillment comes in time blocks, but what people are paying for is access to my over a decade of helping women grow their business, all of my experience, all of my knowledge, all of the hundreds of courses that I've taken. They're getting access to someone who's not afraid to ask really tough questions and call people out on their BS. It is not based on time. Time is a great way for a service-based business to start pricing, but then, like you said, we've got to add in all the other factors. And at the end of the day, I am market rate. I am at the top end of the market rate. And that is because I believe so deeply in the results that I get my women, and I see it every day, and I make no apologies for that.
I love that. An example I have actually is in the legal field. I have a very good friend of mine who she did value-based pricing for, she had a call, please quote, doing this particular type of training, and it killed her, but she put in $25,000 on that training because that was the value of that training. And then she kind of went away and, oh my God, what have I done? And then they said yes. And she told me she would have made $3,000 if she had charged by the hour. And that's the difference.
Yeah. So in the legal industries for years, right, it's been the billable hour. And you set your billable hour, or you set your hourly rate on the basis of how long you've been out, et cetera, et cetera. But I have been persuaded by value price. And the reason for this is a lot of things, but as you become more experienced in your industry, it actually takes you less long to do something, right? Mm-hmm. You can be a lot more effective in a shorter period of time. And if you go on the basis of hourly pricing, you actually would make less the better you are, which doesn't make any sense. And so I've been persuaded to that as well, providing value-based pricing. What is this going to accomplish for a client in their business? And just as Shelagh was saying, when you can see the results, I have clients who've been able to sign on, multi-six-figure clients because of work that we did, that have been able to really scale up their business, build a team, take holidays with their kids for the first time because they had that team in place and they could trust them. When you see the impact on your clients, it's easier then to price on a value proposition as opposed to just the number of hours. The other thing is there are only so many hours in a day. So, and there are certainly, even fewer number of hours that you are effective in a day. Mm-hmm. And so if you are only tied to how much you can make per hour, you're capping yourself at a much lower level than what your service is actually worth.
I call that the selling time for money, and the amount of time you have is finite and the amount people will pay for time is finite. So I think you're onto something there, Andrea. Susan.
I think for me, it was much the same in terms of like shifting from that time-based pricing to the value-based. So a few things sort of stand out for me in the process of sort of articulating that value base. One of them, I know that I've had this chat with several of you, is, being clear about the deliverables and, saying to people that the following is the price for the following deliverable. And now I know that for someone like me with a creative background, I bristle when I have to try and explain to you the amount of life-changing difference the messaging will make in your life in a deliverable, right? If I said to you what it was, it's like you'll get 50 words. That doesn't seem like much for what you're paying for a messaging exercise, for example. So when you dissociate from that and you say, okay, how do you break down the deliverable into result? Then, I guess what I'm leading to with this is the articulation of that value for me is almost as important as aligning yourself as a value, to your point, Shelagh, from the previous episode where you said aligning yourself to saying that my price is $10,000, don't flinch, don't vomit, stop, take a minute, and then say for what? Articulate really clearly, whether in the case of some people that's more of the following 3 documents and the following kind of advisory. In some other people's cases, it's a much more tangible end result. And there's a difference between this and potentially saying skin in the game, but surely how to articulate the difference, Andrea, that you talked about a minute ago, that difference that you're about to make in someone's life, right? You went from not taking a vacation to taking a vacation. If you say that up front, that's a bit of a weird deliverable, but there's value under that. So that articulation piece for me, obviously I think the articulation is important. I'm the marketing lady, but that articulation for me of the value almost convinces yourself of the value of that thing that you're putting out. And that factors into the pricing for me.
And I think I'm very similar to all of you, except that I probably had been in the hourly for a lot longer than all of you, because I've been doing this for a really long time. And I think I fashioned my work after sort of a traditional therapist and got stuck in that mindset of the hourly. And I didn't really... I recently, in the last couple of years, had switched over to packages, and that made me a lot less tired. And I think that part of what I was stuck in is a lot of, really honestly, a lot of money blocks. That was something that I really had to work on in terms of switching out the way in which I did my business. And one of the money blocks that I had to work on was being concerned about what the value looked like to other people. And I was worried about their money beliefs. And I was, I was playing into their fears because I needed to work on my own money beliefs. So once I started to work on that, then pricing got to be a lot easier because, as you guys know from listening to me, I often look at things from sort of the right brain point of view, the emotional point of view. So I think that a lot of this has to do with, I'm really happy that you're giving it structure, Wendy, and I love this. And this is exactly what a lot, especially right brainers like me and people from, as Andrea was saying, people who are in the nurturepreneurs, whatever you want to call them, people who nurture as their business, we often don't have a great mindset around the value of what we do. And it's something I would really recommend that people work on.
I love that, Megan. And I do think that there's so many elements of this. We chatted about the mindset in the last one, but honestly, we do also have to always be cognizant of numbers and have it established at the minimum of our profit that we'll accept for what we're doing, for the work we're doing, of a profit level. Susan, you talked about that as well. But when we think about that, it becomes a filter because we all have great ideas around how different products and services we can offer. But if we have it and put it through, I'm going to make a minimum of 30 points or a minimum of 50 points after I pay overhead, taxes, et cetera, you need to add all those in and then really be clear about what you are spending from a time perspective because, and I think to factor in a little bit of mindset too, because we're so good at what we do, we take it for granted that there's value because it's easy. That means everyone can do it. So I think we have to put that aside and just focus on what the outcomes are, but making sure that we're totally profitable when we do it, because then we can be more free to offer our gifts to the world.
Wendy, I absolutely agree. And having really paying attention to the numbers. I know for a while I thought that I was profitable. And then when I actually looked and someone said, well, how much are you paying yourself? And is that what you would need to pay to a lawyer, like for whatever reason, if you needed to replace yourself? And I was like, oh no, well then you're not really profitable, right? Sometimes we have a false sense of how well we're actually doing. And when you break it down, when you understand and you really allocate for taxes and you pay yourself, or at least you put an intention to pay yourself at the right level, you realize actually you need to be charging a lot more than what you're charging when you truly look at all of the things that go into it. But often we just say, okay, well, we just need to pay the expenses and that's it. And that causes us to price a lot lower than we should be. So I think that's great. I'm so thrilled that you have a step-by-step plan. I wish I had met you when I was starting my business. It saved me a lot of hassle, but yeah.
I think it never ceases to amaze me how expensive it is to run a business. And I think we underestimate how much it costs, which is what everybody has been saying. And, a rule of thumb that I love using and telling people is, number one, know what market rate is, know what other people are charging. And one of our jobs is to understand who our competitors are And I mean, I believe there's more than enough work for everyone. So I don't have a negative connotation with competitors. I love that there's choice out there. I mean, that's what the free market is all about, is having choice and being able to choose where you spend your dollars. But we have to understand and know what market rate and what other people are charging for similar programs. And then you can choose to go higher if you think your program has higher value, or lower if you think they may be a little bit ahead of where you're at. But I love how everybody's saying, let's just remove the emotion from this pricing thing. Just acknowledge that whatever's standing in your way is your story, and this is numbers that we're dealing with. And when I say running a business is expensive, the rule of thumb that I always like to share with my people is, I hear everybody saying, oh, well, I want to make 100,000. I want 6-figure business. Well, if you want to take home 6 figures or 100,000, we need your revenue up over 300,000. That's how expensive it is to run a business. Your taxes, there's just so many hidden expenses that we don't notice. One of the things that I think we forget to budget for is marketing. And if we want to be seen, we have to be prepared to put some dollars behind our promotions and behind marketing and our messaging and making sure that we're heard, so that we can be creating alliances and connections with the right clients for us. It is just a part of running business. The government's going to take a piece of your business because that's what they do, and they're going to come calling. We have our operating costs. So if you want to take home 100,000, let's figure out how to get you up and over 300.
It was interesting. I was asked a question not too long ago, what was my biggest investment in my business? And I actually said myself. That I'm constantly going and learning and engaging with coaches like yourself, Sheila, and other people, because I have to keep feeding myself to get better.
That's so true with the improvement conversation, or the learning, or I know we're talking about this with Andrea later, the preserving of yourself. So I'm so glad you brought that up. Both of you have made points, Sheila and Wendy, that I can certainly see parts of. And I know we've had a previous conversation around how the rich people never question the value of advisory, right? They all have advisors, whether it's legal or financial or, their PR people or whatever it is. So Andrea, feel free to hop in there.
No, it's absolutely true. There's, and I'll talk about it when we talk a little bit more about ourselves as entrepreneurs, but understanding that we are the golden goose, right? Like, we are the thing that drives the business, and we have to make sure that we are paying ourselves enough so that we can have the help that we need, so that we can have the advice that we need, that we have the support that we need. So if we burn ourselves out and we're not investing, the business will only grow as far as we grow.
I think I've heard a saying that for every dollar you invest in your head will be able to turn that into $5. Mm-hmm. And I too, my largest line item in my budget is my coaching. I usually have 2 coaches, if not more. I'm always taking courses. I am going to attend events. I have no problem asking for help. That costs. And so I can't be charging, peanuts for what I'm doing when my expenses are that high.
And that is part of your overhead that you have to charge out to everybody. And on that note,
Wendy, can I ask you a question? One of the things that I love to get into a conversation with people about, especially in the field of marketing and communications, is proving the ROI of an expense. And like we said earlier, it's not the skin in the game sort of thing necessarily. It's much more of a, if I spend this money, what might I get in return? So for example, I often get asked a question, which is what percent of the business should be spent on marketing? And then my answer is never an absolute, because I'm like, what stage of the business are you in? Are you trying to sustain what you're doing? Are you trying to grow? And then the answer varies. So when people talk about marketing ROI, our broad sort of answer is, for every dollar spent, you should expect, as a small business of potentially, under $1 million, you should expect to have $5 back in top line. But I'd love to have you feed into some of that and see how people might want to think about those. It's easy for us to say, let's invest in ourselves and let's get the help that we need. But then it comes back to, okay, I'm out $200,000, and then what should I expect to make from it?
Right. Well, that's a loaded question. So just pass the buck on that one, Susan? I'm going to go to the example of the assistant, because I think that's actually where a lot of women entrepreneurs are trying to do it all themselves, as opposed to bringing anyone in to help. And the assistant piece in my industry, they say that you should be able to, within 12 to 18 months, earn double to triple what you're paying them. And so, but that's an investment of time to bring them up to speed, so that they're taking stuff off your plate, all that kind of stuff. And, you know, it's a caveat to some degree, right? You can go to do as much training and personal development as you want, but if you implement nothing, you got nothing out of it. So there's that unknown factor of the person themselves actually activating on what they've learned and how they're going to do it. So I'm not sure how to answer that, but I think we have to try. We have to, you know, take a look at what our goals are and what resources we need, and then do our best to find the right resources. And we shouldn't let the fear of picking the wrong one prevent us from actually trying something. And I think that's another thing that can hold us back sometimes, is that this will play into the perfectionist conversation, but it's around trying to be perfect. So therefore, you do nothing.
You know, the only thing I think about pricing is when you give a structure, and I wonder what you ladies would think about this, because you're all well tuned into that. I was thinking about someone who is a professional, such as Andrea, who's got a professional rate that their profession dictates. So say, for example, you are, I'm thinking about a physio, and you charge $120. So a physio that I know is charging $150 based on her experience, based on what she feels her time is worth. And she has been largely criticized by other physios in her profession for going beyond that rate. And so it's really interesting to me, because I don't have that. I determine my price. I don't have any governing body. And I think it's really interesting that she has been criticized right, left, and center across the board here in Ottawa. And so in that instance, I'd like to know what your opinion is. Say you are in a profession. What do you think about going above the rate?
Yeah, I'll take that one. So in our profession, there's no one specific rate, but there are clearly market-defined rates. There are certain things that people tend not to go over. And I've worked with clients who are in the healthcare field where, you know, the going rate for chiro is et cetera, or physio. And for them, really, it has been a matter of trying to explain to the client what the value is, and doing more in terms of packages and holistic pricing. So in my own practice, there are very, very few things that I now charge at an hourly rate. Most of them are flat fees. It gives people the ability to predict what they're going to pay, which is a big issue with lawyers, right? Because you think that you're going to pay $1,000 and the bill ends up being $7,000. But it also allows me to build a team to service, and it allows me to move away from the hourly rate and more on the value. This deliverable, this contract that I'm providing, this incorporation that I'm providing, this trademark registration, what is it going to do in the client's life, as opposed to the hourly rate? And for clients that I've had who are in licensed health professions, some of them have been going that way. There are restrictions. So for example, if you're a chiropractor or a naturopath, you can't charge block fees, or if you do and the client doesn't use all of it, you have to refund it. They're a bit stricter, but they've moved away from that and moved into, for example, providing what they're doing with an element of coaching or an element of support or hand holding. And that way they're not competing directly with their profession, because they're not only providing the specific services, they're providing a more holistic service.
You know, my chiropractor does do block charging, and I love it. Mm-hmm. I know exactly what I'm going to go in for. It's based on a year. He knows pretty much how many treatments it's going to take to get somebody back on track, and it includes the maintenance. I love it as a consumer.
Yeah, the professions, unfortunately, the regulatory bodies need to catch up with what the modern consumer wants. The other thing is, sometimes you are going to be criticized. There's a lawyer in the States, lawyer turned coach. Anyone who's heard me talk will know that I love Rachel Rogers. And when she started her virtual practice, she got criticism from tons of other lawyers. People wrote pages and pages of blog posts about how this was the death and the end of the legal industry, and she wasn't paying any attention to any of the traditions, etc. And a lot of it was just, older men who were upset that people were changing things and they couldn't respond to it. And she was getting a segment of the market that they couldn't get because of that attitude. So I think the other thing is to be at peace with the fact that if you're disrupting your industry and doing something different, you will ruffle some feathers. That's fine. They're not your client.
And at the end of the day, I think you just got to stand behind your price.
Yeah.
And stand behind the value that you bring. And it is just a number. It represents nothing more than a number. And we can choose to buy into the people around us, the criticism, the I don't know what you want to call what the lawyers did, but like the criticism, the comments. Yeah, like you can choose to buy into it, or you just hold your course and stand behind the value that you bring, which is what I mean when I talk about being in full integrity with the value you bring. And it's just a number. It means nothing more than that.
And to go back to the numbers, if you charge less, the only person you're shortchanging is yourself, because now you can't pay yourself properly.
And some of the greatest entrepreneurs have been disruptors, right?
Yeah.
Who throw the system and the old beliefs on their on their ass.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I always love when I meet an entrepreneur who's been undercharging and having trouble getting a client or has too many clients, and then we bring her price up to market rate, and then all of a sudden all the right people start showing up and people aren't questioning her price because she's finally charging the right amount.
Yeah.
It's undercharging has just as bad of an impact as overcharging.
There's a connotation there, Sheila. I totally agree. My favorite story here is back in the day, my mom had an IT guy and he charged $25 an hour. So this is telling you how long ago that was. But he didn't have hardly any clients. He raised his rates to 50 and he couldn't stop working. Yeah. He was so busy.
That's common. I remember going through that exercise with Sheila and being completely gobsmacked when the number of clients went up after raising the prices. I think for some of us as well, I know I experienced this. If you raise your rates and you're actually working less, sometimes it can feel too easy. And if you have beliefs around money, that money only comes from really hard work and being down in the trenches and working for long hours, and you start to make more money with less work, it can feel really uncomfortable. And so people self-sabotage, or maybe that's why we don't set the right prices, because we feel like we've got to work for it, right? And if we make more money, we have to have spent more time, in front of the computer or whatever it is that we do. So I think, working with someone like Megan to deal with that money mindset and appreciating that money can come with ease, with very little work, in fact, will help around that comfort level in terms of being able to price what you're really worth.
And can I just add the woo? Because I have to add the woo in. The woo is okay. Is that, our beliefs create our reality, as I keep banging on about, and they send out an energy. And, if you don't want to go woo-woo on it, I certainly, honestly, when I have worked on my mindset and I really had to, trust me, I had to work on this coming out of the gate. I definitely sent out a different energy. I attracted a different client. And even if you don't believe in woo, your subconscious will organize itself differently so that you speak and act differently toward the people that you're doing, your discovery calls with, if nothing else.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have you ever noticed that people's buying patterns match our buying patterns? And so I'm someone who tends to need to sleep on a large buying decision. And I notice that my clients need to sleep on a buying decision. So I always know to book a call the next day or 2 days after. And I have one client who every time she was given a price, she tried to to lower it, and she tried negotiating to bring the price down. And guess what was driving her crazy about her clients is they were trying to do the same with her. And, so if you're someone who pays an installment, you'll tend to have more people who pay in installments. If you pay up front, we attract like. And so, with the pricing and, what Megan's talking about, I think we kind of need to have the behaviors that we want our clients to have. And when we can put out that right behavior, our clients will as well.
Thank you, ladies, for contributing. As you can see, there are lots of factors that go into your pricing, the market rate, the capacity you have, what you need to pay yourself, and your numbers. So don't forget your numbers, because we love the numbers. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you for listening to Insight. If you enjoyed listening, do us a solid and leave us a review. It helps keep us motivated to put our time into producing episodes of value. Thank you.